Hi, I'm Dr. Stazan Sina, and in this video I'm going to talk about the diagnosis of major depression. Before we talk about a diagnosis, we should probably define what diagnosis is. And for me, a diagnosis is a cluster of symptoms that tend to stick together over a period of time. As with all diagnoses, you need to reach or exhibit a certain number in order to qualify for that diagnosis. So with major depression, there are 9 potential symptoms you could exhibit. And in order to receive a diagnosis of major depression, you would need to possess or show 5 of the following 9 symptoms. So the first is depressed mood most of the day. Depressed mood most of the day nearly every day. However, you could also exhibit an irritable mood. Now, I will have a lot of parents of teenagers come to me and say, well, that describes my teen most days. Irritable all the time. How can I tell the difference between them just being a normal teenager and being depressed? Well, let's go back to the definition of diagnosis. You're going to want to see a cluster or number of these symptoms that are sticking together, not 1 or 2. Although, if you see 1 or 2 things that you're concerned about, you should certainly tuck those away in the back of your mind and monitor the situation from there. Number 2, noticeably uninterested in or not receiving pleasure in most things, even things that you typically like to do. So, for example, if you or your teen is an avid skateboarder, and for a period of time now you've not been interested in that, and not interested in other things as well, this may be a sign of depression. Another word for this is anhedonia, and it comes from the Greek word meaning a loss of pleasure or your loss of a capacity to experience pleasure, anhedonia. So you're going to want to watch for anhedonia. Number 3. The following 3, by the way, are considered vegetative symptoms in that they are more indicative of a deterioration in physical activity or a physical component, the physical components to depression. So number 3, significant weight loss or gain, or significant change in appetite. So we're looking for someone who's going from perhaps a regular eater to someone who's not interested in eating, or perhaps someone who has a regular appetite to someone who overeats, a shift from normal functioning. Now, you may have always been someone who's been a picky eater. If you're a picky eater and you still are, that's probably not a sign of depression. But if you were a healthy eater and suddenly become picky over the course of a few weeks or so, that may be a sign of depression. Similarly, you're going to look for significant change in sleeping habits. That is, a change from what you typically do, either sleeping more or much less. Once again, parents will come to me and say, well, my teenager sleeps all the time. Are they depressed? Perhaps, perhaps not. Teenagers tend to need more sleep than adults. Brain development-wise, they're just not fully developed as we are, and they're going to need more sleep to recuperate. However, you're looking for a change that is appreciatively different from a previous state. For example, someone who tended to get a good night's sleep can no longer sleep, or someone who tended to get about 8 hours sleep now wants to linger in bed 10, 12 hours. That may be a sign of depression. Number 5, significant change in energy levels. Just don't feel like they can get themselves up out of bed, up off the couch. They may say that they feel fatigued. This may be a sign of depression. Number 6, a person may either feel agitated, that is, feeling kind of high-strung, intense, or the opposite, feeling kind of slowed down, lethargic, fatigued. This goes along with a decreased energy level. Number 7, feeling sort of worthless or excessively guilty or bad about choices or bad about your beliefs. Feeling very negative about oneself. Self-esteem decreasing. That can also be a sign of depression. Number 8, difficulty thinking concentrating, or is indecisive. Once again, I've had a number of parents come to me whose children have ADHD diagnoses and say, well, they can't focus. Does that mean they're depressed? Well, someone who has ADHD could also be depressed. However, ADHD has its own host of symptoms or cluster of symptoms that tend to stick together. And just pinpointing a focusing issue doesn't necessarily mean that they are either depressed or have ADHD. Once again, you're looking for a cluster of symptoms that tend to stick together for that diagnosis. Number 9, recurring thoughts about death or suicide or being preoccupied with those themes. Here also, I'll have a lot of parents come to me and say, my teen is listening to music with depressive themes. Are they depressed? And my answer is, well, tell me a little bit more. And I will listen to see if they have some of these other symptoms. One of the things that I often say to parents is, if an otherwise healthy teen is starting to listen to depressed music, it doesn't necessarily mean they're depressed, or that it will make them become depressed. However, a person who is already depressed is probably going to be more likely to gravitate toward this type of music, artwork, movies. So those are the 9 symptoms. Now there are a few other things that you need to be mindful of. That they're reporting feeling a significant distress, or there's a significant impairment in their functioning. They're just not producing or tending to the things as well as they used to. Another thing you want to consider is that this depression is not related to a medical condition, such as hypothyroidism, that is low thyroid, that it's not related to some sort of substance abuse issue, and with teens that's particularly important to differentiate, or that it's some side effect of some medication. So you want to rule out some of these more biological causes. Lastly, in order to receive this diagnosis, you need to exhibit these symptoms for at least a 2-week period of time, that is 14 consecutive days. And this helps us to filter out temporary sadness or more of a situational issue from something that is more long-standing and serious and perhaps biologically based. So 14 consecutive days to receive the diagnosis as well. A couple of other points, other things to consider. You want to monitor for any isolating behavior or withdrawing. If you or your teen are spending more time alone, that may be a sign of depression. Poor eye contact. Folks who are depressed definitely carry themselves in a certain way, and their body language gives off a feeling of depression. And one of the ways that it shows up is poor eye contact. So something else to consider. Unresolved grief. That is the recent loss of something, someone, that they're having great difficulty processing or getting through. Grief in and of itself isn't major depression, but when someone gets stuck in the grief process, that could be something that evolves into a depression, and so you need to be mindful of this as well. Lastly, feelings of hopelessness. Feeling as if there's no light at the end of the tunnel, there's nothing you can do about it. Feeling rather negative about the prognosis or change in your mood is also a sign of depression. So, over the last 8 or 9 minutes, what I've tried to do is to clarify the criteria for major depression and also add a little bit about what to look for with your teenager. I hope the video was informative, and I hope that you will join me for future videos. Thank you.